Welcome to The Big Story. I'm Gretchen Ho.
I'm Pauline Verzosa.
And I'm Sean Yao.
Tonight's big stories. Sara Duterte, in her most open disregard yet for the House of Representatives, is now inside her brother Pulong's office at the lower chamber. The vice president refuses to budge until one of her staff cited in contempt is out of detention.
Over at the upper chamber, the Senate, the vice president seems to have more allies who are now considering increasing her office's budget earlier cut by the lower house.
And critics of the Dutertes are wondering if the family's patriarch Digong could be next after the International Criminal Court ordered the arrest of the Israeli Prime Minister for crimes against humanity.
Our top story for tonight, the Vice President Sara Duterte is staying put inside the House of Representatives. She says she is not leaving until Monday, November 25, the day her Chief of Staff, Zuleika Lopez, is supposed to be freed from detention.
That's also the day the House Committee on Good Government and Public Accountability resumes its inquiry into the OVP and the DepEd's confidential funds. But while Sara is already inside the House premises, she's not sure if she will finally attend what could be the panel's last hearing.
The vice president's recent action has drawn condemnation from the House leadership. Not only did it trigger a lockdown that caused inconvenience, it also flouted House protocols that, for many, showed a lack of respect. Ria Fernandez with a big story tonight.
Shortly before 8 in the evening of Thursday, November 21, Vice President Sara Duterte arrived at the House of Representatives to visit her Chief of Staff, Zuleika Lopez. But since visiting hours at the lower chamber is only between 8 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon, the two ladies were only allowed to meet at the visitor center. Lopez is now detained at the House after being cited in contempt over undue interference with the Good Government Committee's probe into the confidential funds of the OVP and DepEd. Duterte's visit lasted until 10 p.m., but she did not leave at once. According to House officials, the VP stayed overnight in their premises, right inside the office of her brother, Davao Congressman Paulo Duterte. The House had to turn off power at some point, a rule that has since been enforced when the building is not in official use.
Simula midnight or 12:30 in the morning hanggang kaninang umaga, the close-in team or the Vice President stayed locked inside room 304. So about 7:30 this morning, upon request of our Personnel and Finance Office, we had to turn on the power again dahil magtatrabaho po sila sa SWA. 8 o'clock, the Vice President's security team remained locked inside the room 304. At 10:53, we noticed the Vice President together with entourage left the room of the Honorable Pulong Duterte, and we followed her all the way to the detention facility.
Before this, Duterte asked the House Committee on Good Government in writing to allow her to accompany Lopez in detention because of concerns on her health and security. But the House panel declined the request since Duterte is not a detainee. The House also rejected Pulong Duterte's separate appeal to have Lopez transferred to his office instead for humanitarian reasons. The only request the Good Government Committee granted was the VP's visit to her staff.
Sana naman po yung respeto po at yung leniency na binibigay po natin sa ating Vice President, suklian din naman po niya ng respeto. Pag may nangyari naman po, unang-una po si ating Vice President, high profile po yan na personality. Hindi naman po yung ordinaryong mamamayan. Pag may nangyari po dyan, sagutin din po nila yan. Sana po sumunod lamang po nang sa ganun ay hindi na magkaroon ng ganitong klaseng issue. Respect begets respect.
As a result of Sara's refusal to follow rules, security around the lower house had to be beefed up. Since the country's second in command is inside Batasan, the north gate of the building had to be reinforced by 2 truckloads of policemen and a SWAT team. The south wing was also placed on lockdown. But in an exclusive interview, Sara's brother does not see the point of beefing up security.
Are they talking about security? Ano tingin na sa Vice Presidente ng Pilipinas? Kriminal? Kung mamatay yung Vice President dyan sa opisina ko, di wala tayong magawa. Hindi umuwi silang lahat, pauwi
for Pulong, his sister can stay as long as she wants in his office, since the Filipino people owns the House of Representatives building. But the lower chamber's leadership is not taking this breach lightly. They are exploring peaceful means to end this soon, or at least avoid a repeat of such action that puts the institution's integrity in question. For News 5, Ria Fernandez, We Are One News.
Political pundit Ronald Llamas says that Vice President Duterte's most recent action is mere political calculation. On our sister program Storycon, Llamas noted breaches on the part of Sara Duterte when it comes to security, propriety, and separation of powers between the executive and the legislative branches of government. By staying inside the House premises, or the Batasang Pambansa, on her own terms, Llamas said the Vice President put lawmakers on the spot and could be sending the message that she is above their rules. Llamas added that Sara also has her own version of the bigger picture on why her office is being investigated by the lower chamber.
Sineset niya yung predicate na itong House ay itong mga hearings na ito, na binanggit na niya dati, ay hearings in aid of impeachment. No? So pinupush niya yung envelope na siya naman na nag-offensive. No? Dahil ang tingin niya may offensive laban sa kanya. No? Kaya nagbulo ngayon yung House. No? Nagbulo. No? At patapos na yung Quadcom hearing at tingin ko ito ay parang appetizer lang. Tingin ko meron pa silang plano na bigger disruptions.
Could this serve to generate public sympathy?
Well, merong mga forces na naghahanda ng mga mobilization, no? Pag nagsimula yung impeachment. Huwag niyo na akong tanungin kung sino yung mga grupo na yon, no?
A while ago, we had Congressman J.J. Suarez on Storycon. Tinanong namin kung citing the Vice President in contempt is in the cards. So sabi nila, sa hearing lang pala pwedeng gawin yun. Kaya nakikiusap sila ng maayos sa ngayon sa Vice President na kung pwede siya na lang ang sumunod sa patakaran.
Hindi mo siya pwedeng basta-basta lang i-cite in contempt. And I think yung other weird thing about this, I mean, I'm using the word weird, is because Friday na Friday, di ba? Tapos biglang pumutok to. And I don't think this has ever happened before.
Oh, yun nga.
Yun.
Sabi ni Ronald, parang
Never.
first time ito.
Yeah.
Oo, tapos nagpa-press con pa si Vice Presidente. Mga 6 p.m. nagsimula yun via Zoom. Ang sinabi niya rito ay bakit siya sasagot sa kriminal. Nahihiya ako para sa Pilipinas. So sinabi sa akin na gano'n nangyari. Isang tao na convicted ng child abuse of IP children. Ito nga, she was referring to Congresswoman Franz Castro. Ay sinight in contempt ang isang IP lawyer, nahiya ako, pero dito sa ating bansa, ang isang tao na convicted ay may power. Saan ka nakakita ng ganyan? At bakit siya sasagot sa mga ganun daw na nakaluklok sa House?
Pero lagyan lang natin ng context. I think pinapatamaan niya mismo si Congresswoman Franz because si Congresswoman Franz yung nag-move to cite Zuleika Lopez, yung Chief of Staff ni Vice President Sara Duterte, in contempt. So siya yung naggawa ng motion, sinecond nung panel chairman na si Manila Representative Joel Chua.
Because of interference daw, allegedly sending a letter to COA not to appear in the House hearings.
Pero when you watch all the hearings, parang you kind of get the feeling na papunta na rin talaga sa contempt based on how, yun nga, pag hindi sumasagot yung tao ng diretso, usually yun yung nagyayari.
Well, the Vice President did say she plans to stay until Monday, which is also the day of the hearing of the Committee on Good Government and Public Accountability. So we'll see kung a-attend na rin siya. Dahil nandun na rin naman siya on Monday.
At sinabi nga ni Ronald din, na nilagay niya yung mga congressman sa posisyon na damn if you do, damn if you don't.
Yes.
Kasi now they have to get back to the drawing board, finding out a way to respond to this move by the Vice President.
And not just respond, but respond in a way na, hindi ka magmumukhang masama, diba? Siyempre, yun naman talaga yung labanan ngayon. So we'll see how this develops.
We'll see on Monday. In the meantime, while all of this was happening at the lower house, some senators are now considering to give the office of the Vice President more funding. One of them is Senator Joel Villanueva, who thinks that the House-approved budget for the OVP is not enough. Mayan Los Baños with a big story.
At least 5 senators have expressed support to increase the budget of the Office of the Vice President for next year. That's according to Senator Joel Villanueva, who revealed this to the media today.
I have spoken to like 4 or 5 members na pareho ng aking pananaw na increasean ng ang budget ng Office of the Vice President mula doon sa gap na ipinasa ng Congress.
Recall that the Senate Finance Committee adopted the House of Representatives' decision to cut the budget of the OVP to 733 million pesos from the 2 billion as originally proposed in the National Expenditure Program. This budget was submitted by the Executive Department to Congress. Senator Joel Villanueva said the push to increase the 733 million pesos approved budget of the OVP for 2025 is to help the agency's social programs.
I'm looking at the office and I feel like we need to put some more social fund na pwedeng gamitin ng ating Vice President. Kasi Vice President's office yan eh.
Also considered are the employees of the OVP who may lose their jobs due to the lower budget. Vice President Sara Duterte earlier lamented that around 200 workers in the OVP could lose their jobs if it will only operate with the said amount. Villanueva says he is thinking of proposing to add at least 150 million pesos to the OVP budget.
I don't look at personalities, I don't look at whatever some politicians are looking at. Right now, I'm just after the office itself. The office of the Vice President deserve more.
But for Senator Risa Hontiveros, the 733 million budget for OVP is already enough. Hontiveros noted that previous vice presidents were able to operate their office even with a budget under 1 billion pesos.
As of today, I would vote against adding to the OVP budget. Nakapag-operate na nga ang ibang mga OVPs in previous administrations sa ganyang level lang. At hindi ko na binago pa yung lumabas sa House version na may mga pondo sa propose sa programa ng OVP na mukhang repetition ng mga existing programs ng ibang mga department.
Hontiveros, however, said that she remains open to hearing arguments to the increase of the OVP budget. The lower house opted to cut the budget of the Office of the Vice President by 1.29 billion pesos as lawmakers push to realign this fund to other government agencies like the Department of Social Welfare and Development and the Department of Health. Reporting for News 5, Mean Los Baños, we are One News.
Up next here on The Big Story, with all of former President Rodrigo Duterte's statement in congressional hearings on the war on drugs, how is the ICC's case buildup against the former president and his co-accused doing? We have on the show International Criminal Court's Assistant to Counsel, Attorney Christina Conti. The Big Story returns. Keep it here.
Welcome back. You're still watching the big story here on One News. Absurd and anti-Semitic. That is how Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described the arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court against him. In a statement, he said it is falsely accusing him, the democratically elected Prime Minister of the State of Israel, as well as the former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, of deliberately targeting civilians, when what they actually do is avoid civilian casualties. But the ICC insists it has reasonable grounds to link the Prime Minister to the civilian killings in the war against Gaza and Hezbollah, and that he is responsible for crimes committed such as starvation as a method of warfare and crimes against humanity of murder, persecution, and other inhumane acts. Aside from Netanyahu and Gallant, the ICC has also ordered arrested Hamas leader Mohammed Diab Ibrahim al-Masri. He's said to be one of the masterminds of the October 7 attack, where more than 41,000 were killed, although Israel said they have already killed him in an airstrike. With the arrest warrants issued for violations committed in the Gaza conflict, critics of former President Rodrigo Duterte are now wondering, could a decision on the war on drugs be next? Let's discuss this with attorney Christina Conti, International Criminal Court's Assistant to Counsel. A good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yes, good evening.
Okay. Attorney Conti, let's start first with the arrest warrants issued against the Israel leaders and also against the Hamas commander. The U.S. President Joe Biden denounced the decision. He says that there's no equivalence between Israel and Hamas. But the officiality of this spells something else. What do you think will the effect be on the current conflict?
Well, certainly this will have an impact on the current conflict in the sense that this should serve as a deterrent to ongoing hostilities. In fact, that is specifically why these warrants, traditionally secret, on paper, there should be no trace of these applications and issuances of the warrants, and should only be known upon the arrest, the actual arrest of the person. So the ICC said we should unseal these warrants so that, one, we can show the victims that we are doing something in relation to these cases, and second, to deter further conflict. Up to what extent it will affect the actions of Netanyahu and, well, the former Minister Gallant, that remains to be seen. But certainly it should serve as a deterrent for these Israeli officials, in the sense of, one, travel to other countries, and second, seeking support from other countries. In fact, also within the day, the European Union made a strong statement that since all members of the EU are members of the ICC, they will implement the warrant. And if Netanyahu ever visits one of their countries, then he's subject to arrest. There are several other countries as well which identified areas where they can impact as well, meaning they would disengage from Israel, either withdraw support or entirely denounce the actions of Israel.
Okay, but Attorney Conti, talk to us through when Prime Minister Netanyahu said he's not going to stop and he's not going to follow. Like, how does that work out when there is the arrest warrant? How will this be served? Like, what can we expect to, for how will things unfold, I guess, in the next few weeks?
Well, yes, it's certainly more complicated compared to the Philippines in Israel's case, because Israel never accepted the jurisdiction of the ICC. This case was brought before the court because Palestine did. So Palestine accepted the jurisdiction of the ICC, and because the actions happened within its jurisdiction, within the state of Palestine, the ICC recognized jurisdiction. However, the perpetrators can be found in a state which is not a member of the ICC. And, to look at the realpolitik, it's supported by the US, one of the world's superpowers, and a clear critic of the ICC if it is offensive or contrary to its interests. So in this case, the arrest of Israeli officials, which should be implemented by a local or a national police, cannot be affected by, obviously, the Israeli police. So we are looking at the least, their confinement in Israel, inability to travel. If these officials ever think of moving to countries which are members of the ICC, then their police can implement the warrant.
Okay, Attorney Conti, we all heard U.S. President Joe Biden's strong condemnation of this, but the U.S. itself is has not ratified the Rome Statute. They're not a signatory, rather, to it. What kind of message does that give, given that, the U.S. being a superpower, not a signatory of the Rome Statute, and yet strongly condemning it? How will this possibly affect, how things will develop or unfold?
Well, it's self-interest. Actually, the U.S. was one of the major movers behind the creation of an international criminal court. It came from the Nuremberg trials, where they were one of the main pillars of the trials there in Germany. Now, when the crimes of aggression were put out and suggested as one of the core crimes of the ICC, that's when the U.S. suddenly started to pull back. Crimes of aggression might possibly affect them and include within the ambit American officials and military officials at that. Because on the part of the US, I think there is an acceptance or recognition that they have been perpetrating crimes of aggression. So clearly this is an act of self-preservation. Unfortunately, there have been instances when you can clearly see the US's sort of cognitive dissonance. They stand for law and order. They stand for an international legal order. But suddenly they would like to pull out of an institution that stands precisely for that. So on the part of the US, it takes a lot of political capital for it to assert its position now that it is contesting the ICC warrants of arrest.
Do you mean to say when you said a while ago that this is more complex than the Philippine situation because Israel is not a signatory of the Rome Statute, does it mean that it is impossible to arrest the two leaders in their own land, and could they escape to, let's say, the United States, China, or Russia? At walang paraan talaga to do that. At ang gagawin lang nito ay iiwasan lang niya yung mga bansang sumusuporta. Ganun lang kasimple ba yun? And is there no mechanism at all? Because here we have the Interpol, no, na sinasabi ni Justice Secretary Boying Remulla na pwedeng parang backdoor yan. Hindi niya sinabing ganon, pero parang ganon.
Yun yung way para ma-serve yung warrant, kumbaga.
Well, yes, actually, sadly, that could be the situation where any subject of a warrant of arrest will just stay put in a place where will be unreachable by the arms of the law of the ICC. But in history, we've seen several, hindi yan mapapakali, medyo makati din yung mga paa niyan. And remember, Netanyahu is a sitting head of state. And it's improbable for him not to leave his country, considering that he would be the primary diplomat of his country in a time that they would need support from the international community. It's improbable and it's weird for him to stay put. So in this sense, it makes his world smaller. Liliit ang mundo niya. And to some extent, it could impact even their domestic politics. Because if the Israeli people do not want an internationally wanted criminal or someone wanted in position, then it could mean he would lose power within his country. So there's many layers to it. And we're just looking at the different experiences of other countries. For example, Fujimori. In history, there are other people who thought that, hindi naman ako mahuhuli ever. But then they slipped. And then they got arrested. So it's two ways to look at it. Either you look at it pessimistically, they will never be arrested. Or optimistically, there could be at one point some diplomatic mechanism to allow the arrest of these people.
Okay, of course, Attorney Conti, we invited you tonight because when news of the arrest warrants broke, these 3 arrest warrants broke, everyone could not help but compare it to the case of former President Rodrigo Duterte here in the Philippines. 2 months ago, I believe you went on the record, you said it's not exactly the same, no? Kasi may gulo pa doon, marami pang namamatay tuloy yung dahas doon. And that's why mas may sense of urgency. You also said at that time, 2 months ago na, nag-apply na si Prosecutor Karim Khan ng arrest warrants. And here we are today, we've seen it. Can you talk us through like the basic similarities or maybe the differences as with the case of former President Duterte, because you've also said before, no, that you've been trying to prove na ongoing pa rin itong kumbaga drug war, so to speak, to make the case for sense of urgency.
So, as you've mentioned, there is urgency in the Palestine situation because the bombardment is ongoing, and in fact, Israel has even expanded its territorial scope. Pati sa Lebanon, nagbobomba siya. Even Syria, there have been ground incursions. And then we've seen the death toll, and its target really is children and women. In the Philippines, I mean, the worst is over, so to speak, although there are some killings still happening. Most of the killings that have been pinned onto the Dutertes were during 2016, 2017, 2018. So, I would say, from the eyes of the ICC, this would be more urgent. However, we didn't see that kind of urgency in the period of the request and then the issuance. These warrants were requested actually 6 months ago and were just granted now. So, I mean, that could debunk the entire argument about are they seeing this as urgent or are they looking at information or evidence that would support the warrant of arrest. In the Philippines, our advantage is our situation, our investigation has been in place since 2023. Although in Palestine, it has been under consideration since, I think, 2014. At the least, 2023, there was a clear instruction that in the Philippines, an investigation should continue. And we've seen the ICC being very active in looking for witnesses, and even at one point suggesting that there were suspects already. So they have already named 5 suspects, as confirmed even by the Philippine government. So that's Bato, etc., and 4 other chief police. Now, here's the thing. It could be a matter of one, urgency. Is there a need to deter current or ongoing acts? Or second, is it a matter of evidence? On the part of the Philippines, we think the development is that because of the Quadcom hearings, because of the Senate investigation, there have been recently new information or, as we say, admissions on the part of President Duterte as regards the killings. And that could lead or that could pin him down within the framework of this ongoing investigation, where the question is, so kapag investigation, ang tanong ay, sino ang pinaka-responsable? And we've heard the person claim that he was most responsible for this. And I would say that should signal the end of the investigation and move us towards trial.
On the other hand, though, Attorney Conti, no, just to kind of see it from all angles, if can't the Quadcom investigations, that whole series of it, already be considered as an ongoing investigation, although we all know that it is for legislation or in aid of legislation, but can that be considered as an ongoing investigation and therefore kind of laid credence that our justice system is working, etc., etc.?
May oath naman kasi, di ba? Yun ang sinasabi.
Well, because you've also qualified the investigations as in aid of legislation, ang resulta niyan ay papel report o kaya batas. And clearly, it is not the same kind of investigation that the ICC has its finger on. They are looking at investigations that will lead to criminal prosecution. And it's only that kind of investigation where the same conduct, the same perpetrators are being investigated and eventually will be prosecuted. So sa atin, hindi pa yon. I would say, and moving forward, I would say that it could be the DOJ investigation, which was announced by Secretary Rimulya, that they were looking at crimes in RA 9851 for possible charges against Duterte. So that could be a reason for the ICC to step back. However, and here is where President Duterte has to make a decision. However, the jurisdiction or admissibility, kumbaga dito papasok yung pwede bang mag-exercise ng jurisdiction yung ICC. That question was already questioned or raised by the Philippine government in 2021. And they lost the issue. In July 2023, it was made clear that the ICC retains jurisdiction over crimes within that period and within this territorial jurisdiction, and that it could continue with the investigation. Kumbaga natapos na yung issue. These Quadcom investigation and DOJ investigations are supervening events. So they happened after the decision. Someone has to raise the question again. And I would say that the only person or most probable entity to question that jurisdiction, again, would be Duterte coming forward to the ICC and claiming that the ICC has no jurisdiction over these crimes. So I guess that's a precarious situation for him,
how would that
because
work?
that would be accepting the jurisdiction of the ICC.
Yeah, how would that work? How would President Duterte has been obviously super anti-ICC for a while now. I cannot picture him even approaching. What good would it do him? Can you help us see, Attorney Conti, kung meron bang maitutulong yun sa kanyang kaso?
Well, yes. Because if he questions jurisdiction at this stage, then maybe he can stave off or he can prevent the issuance of a warrant of arrest. When he questions or anyone questions the jurisdiction of the ICC, formally, hindi yung ano na lang ina-announce na, wala namang jurisdiction yung ICC. Formally, you have to engage. Because the question has already been resolved on the part of the ICC. It's not an issue right now. It's a non-issue. So someone has to raise it.
So it has to
And
be only...
when you talk about jurisdiction, it goes into the very meat of the case. Kumbaga, is the ICC qualified or is it authorized to hear the case? And if not, then it cannot proceed with the identification of perpetrators, it cannot issue a warrant of arrest, and so forth. So that's a suggestion. Okay.
But
actually,
is
that's
he
a
the
possibility.
only one, Attorney? Siya lang ba pwede? Tanging siya lang? Specifically, the
Well,
former president?
there
Could it
could
be
be
somebody
others.
else? There could be others.
Yes, there could be others, of course. But at this rate of the investigation and in the investigations in the Philippines, there's only one person claiming responsibility for these crimes against humanity. I'm seeing that it could be also any of the 5 police officials who were identified as quote-unquote suspects. So that's Bato, Albayalde, Mata, Karamat, and Leonardo. So these police officials could also come forward and say, we would like to cooperate, quote-unquote, with the ICC and give you our thoughts. So they could do this in the form of submissions before the ICC. And in these submissions, they could raise the jurisdiction. Actually, hindi kayo pwedeng mag-imbestiga or actually, hindi kayo pwedeng mag-prosecute. So I guess that's the only way right now because the ICC will continue investigating unless there is a formal submission that it should stop.
Okay, Attorney, quickly, you did say previously that the ICC notice or the summons could come within the year. Do you still see that happening? I mean, it's already November, 1 month na lang, tapos na po ang 2024. Could that still happen within the year?
Well, I'm hoping yes. Although, hindi ko lang alam yung mga nag-ano dyan, nagpupustahan. Baka matalo eh. Of course, I can always say, I hope they will be issued within the year. There's still 1 month to go. However, of course, if it does not, there is no development, then of course we have 2025 to look forward to. We're looking at the specific chamber. So this is pre-trial chamber 1, which issued the warrants for Israel. We're looking at, logistical considerations in the court. They actually just changed or replaced some of the judges in the court. That's why we're thinking there could have been delay in the sense that the new judges had to catch up with the readings. And as what happened in Israel, in the Palestinian case, I guess they have already caught up with the reading in this situation. I am confident that they will eventually catch up to the readings in the Philippine situation. So it could be anytime soon. And again, we're not discounting the possibility that warrants of arrest have already been issued in the Philippine situation, but have not yet been unsealed. So secret kasi ito. So investigation proceedings are actually or should be kept confidential, except if the ICC or any of the parties deem it within the interest of the larger public to unseal or to disclose.
Which is
so talagang secret ang rule.
Which is the case,
exception is you announce it.
Kay Putin.
Oo, dito sa Israel-Hamas
Netanyahu.
conflict. Sabi nila hindi na daw busy si Prosecutor Karim Khan. Kaya may time na siya para dito sa Pilipinas. Ayun nga ang
Could be, but
usap-usapan.
also there's this point that I want to clarify this. The Office of the Prosecutor has many officials
Okay.
and many employees.
Hindi lang isang
and
tao.
for the Philippines, we have two assigned, two other assigned prosecutors. So I'm hopeful that given that we have 2 persons or 3 persons, including Karim Khan, so kahit umexit pa si Karim Khan, actually you just need the prosecutor mainly during trial. During case build-up, yung stars of the show mo dyan ay yung investigators. So I'm pinning my hopes on them that they sooner or later finish the investigation and determine who is most responsible. But what I always say is this, baka nga hindi na lang yung question ng investigation ang tinatapos nila. So the question during investigation is, who is most responsible? Maybe they've already answered that. They are just now, even as early as this, preparing for trial. Where the question is, are the persons that we brought to court guilty? And that's the kind of lawyering that we do actually. You have to be sure until the very end that you secure a conviction. And you don't go to trial if you don't think you will win.
All right.
So I think, and I'm confident that the ICC is looking at a conviction in our situation.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and for all those answers. We'll have you back again for updates on that. But in the meantime, happy weekend. Attorney Christina Conti, Assistant to Counsel for the International Criminal Court.
We're going to pause for another quick break, but up next, the AFP has confirmed the existence of a U.S. task force in Palawan. We'll be speaking with Philippine Navy spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, Rear Admiral Vincent Trinidad, when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
Welcome back. You're still watching Big Story here on One News.
5 defense chiefs met for the first time in history at the sidelines of the ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting Plus in Laos. Our very own Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro was joined by U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, as well as Australian Minister for Defense Industry Pat Conroy, Japan's Nakatani Gen, and Kim Yong-hyun of Korea. Austin described their meeting as delivering results together in support of a free and open Indo-Pacific region. The leaders also reportedly vowed to continue upholding respect for international law and sovereignty in the region and emphasize the importance of close multilateral cooperation in support of regional security and stability. Now, this happened right after Austin himself bared that a task force has been created for the Ayungin Shoal. Apart from that, it was also reported that Philippine Ambassador to the U.S., Babe Romualdez, had revealed that our Department of National Defense is also now considering putting American troops on standby in other areas of the West Philippine Sea.
Let's delve into this further with Philippine Navy spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, Rear Admiral Vincent Trinidad on the line. Magandang gabi, Admiral.
Yes, magandang gabi, Vincent, Pauline, and Sean. At sa mga taga-subaybay ninyo, magandang gabi sa inyo lahat.
Okay, unang-una po, tungkol dito sa Task Force Ayungin, ang sinasabi po ay technical support lamang ang pinaprovide ng United States military to our troops. With what you can reveal, what are the specifics of that? Paano binibigyan ng technical support ang bansa natin dito sa Task Force Ayungin?
Yes, alam mo, ito ay una sa lahat, ladies, ito ay part ng ating implementation of the Mutual Defense Board and the Security Engagement Board. There are different activities across both of those boards, and this is one particular activity. Ang sa atin naman, we receive the output ng kanilang maritime domain awareness of the West Philippine Sea. Ibig sabihin, they have the technical expertise, capabilities. Ang sa atin, ang natatanggap natin, yung result, yung output, knowing what's out there.
So in this sense, we'll be able to track better where the Chinese boats are, including the ones that are off the radar. Tama po ba?
Yes, actually, hindi lamang yung mga sa Chinese, sa Coast Guard o sa PLA Navy, but overall domain awareness as much as possible all over the archipelago. But for this particular instance, with emphasis on the West Philippine Sea.
Okay. Admiral, kung pwede nyo lang pong paliwanag sa amin, ang sinabi kasi ni National Security Advisor Anyo na itong task force daw is a unit internal to the United States. Pero pagkakaintindi namin, nandito sila. So can you explain to us ano yung ibig sabihin ng may internal unit na nandito sa Pilipinas?
Yes. Yung organization na yan is how they would set up to be able to provide us the support. So, maraming paraan paano sa mag-organize, we leave it up to them. Yun ang ibig sabihin na internal to them. Ang sa atin, we receive the output, the results of the domain awareness monitoring. Yun ang kailangan natin.
Admiral, bukod dito po sa Ayungin Shoal, totoo po ba na merong plano na maglagay rin po ng American troops in other areas dito po sa Pilipinas?
So far, wala pa naman tayo nababalitaan na gano'n. Pero on a need basis, like example for HADR, yung mga response natin na nanggaling sa mga EDCA sites, staging areas, may mga coordination na there will be times na kailangan ng troops on the ground for coordination. Like for example, kung may papasok sa mga release goods nila, being brought in by aircraft, kailangan may mga kasundaluhan sila on the ground to help us monitor and coordinate all the relief efforts.
Rear Admiral, pag sinabi natin Task Force Ayungin, ibig sabihin nakafocus po ba yan dun sa RORE missions to Ayungin? Or is this just a name to call this cooperation with the United States?
Yes, madam. That mukhang mas precise yun, It's just a name for the organization for the U.S. to be able to provide us with information and domain awareness.
Okay. Rear Admiral, tatanong ko lang, sabi ni Congressman Ace Barbers na meron daw mga Chinese Navy na nagtatago daw sa kunwaring fake fishing boats. Kunwari, fisherman sila basically, pero talagang Coast Guard and Navy ang mga sakay. Ano po yung masasabi ninyo tungkol dito? Is this accurate?
Yes, that is very accurate. These are also called the maritime militia. Ito yung mga fishing boats na during peacetime, they do their normal fishing activities. And in times of crisis or wartime, they are enablers or multipliers of the PLA Navy, the Chinese Military Commission, and or the Coast Guard.
So to
So ito ang
clarify,
ginagamit nila. Itong ginagamit nila to have their consistent or persistent presence.
so yun yung nakasanayan nating tinatawag nating maritime militia vessels. It's the same thing.
Yes.
Okay.
It's the same thing.
What about, sabi rin daw po, ikakalat daw po sa other parts ng West Philippine Sea. Like, I think Gretchen asked you earlier and you said wala pa namang plano sa ngayon. Pero ano pa ba yung mga ibang areas na tinitignan natin na possible na kailangan i-up yung ante pagdating sa pagmamonitor?
Right now, our emphasis is West Philippine Sea, the Northern Islands, and yung southern backdoor natin. Hindi lamang sa PLA Navy or the Chinese Coast Guard, but alam naman natin sa southern backdoor natin, transnational crime. So we're also giving emphasis to that. And more especially right now with the passage of the Maritime Zones Act and the yung sea lanes law natin, we will need more capabilities when it comes to monitoring our domain, maritime domain.
Rear Admiral, babalik ko lang dun sa sa fake fishing boats. Paano po natin nalaman na fake talaga 'yun? Kasi nakikita naman natin actually nalapitan ko 'yun eh. 'Yun yung maritime militia nga na ginagamit nila pang block. Parang may blocking maneuvers. But were we able to go on board to understand what they're actually doing inside? Meron po ba tayong ganung ebidensya?
Yes, we don't have to go on board to be able to know what's on board. Anong dala nila. Pero there are times, depende sa season, ng taon. Pag fishing season, makikita natin sila, they do the fishing activities. And then, pag kinakailangan na they would show na may presence sila, long-term presence, ginagamit nila ito. Ito yung mga naka-angkla na tabi-tabi. Nest in nest, kung tawag natin sa naval parlance. Kung makita natin, marami ito sila. So these are fishing boats, landtime, maritime militias, landtime enablers, or multipliers of the Coast Guard and the Navy.
Okay. Just circling back, Rear Admiral, to Task Force Ayungin, since nagkaroon tayo ng Task Force Ayungin dito sa Pilipinas and all the training, etc., nagbawas ba or did this result in less Chinese vessels in the West Philippine Sea? May ganun bang effect?
Ang objective naman natin in our coordination with the U.S. is not really to minimize the number of ships ng PLA Navy or Coast Guard. Itong engagement natin with them is more for monitoring our domain. So we call that maritime domain awareness. Okay. Yung ating capability is being reinforced by what the U.S. has.
Rear Admiral, bilang pahuli lang po, meron kasing ni-reveal dun sa meeting ni Secretary Guibo at saka ni Lloyd Austin, yung unmanned surveillance platform na T-12. What exactly does that give? Kasi kukuha po tayo ng ganun under the foreign military financing. Ano pong impormasyon na nakukuha natin mula sa T-12?
Yes, right now this unmanned system is a new foot on the block, ika nga. So para sa AFP, it's a new capability, new technology. Nasa training phase pa lang tayo. So kumbaga, ini-introduce pa lang sa atin.
Okay, yan yung gagamitin sa
para sa maritime domain.
Sa pagpapatrol ng mga sea lanes natin.
Okay.
Tama po ba, Rear Admiral?
Pakiulit, madam.
Yun yung gagamitin sa pagbantay sa mga archipelagic sea lanes, yung maritime domain natin, basically for monitoring, right?
Yes, for monitoring. But right now, wala pa tayo sa level na yun. We are still in the learning or training stage.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We know you're a busy person, but thank you for your time. Philippine Navy spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, Rear Admiral Vincent Trinidad.
And since it's the weekend, we are starting our very own, Christmas countdown tonight, guys. 33 days.
Merry Christmas. There you
33 days to go before we give those gifts
33
away.
na lang.
33 days. The countdown is here.
I know. Parang nata-stress ako instead of sumay.
Parang traffic, kailangan magbigay ng regalo sa mga inaanak. Daming party pupuntahan. Well, just a reminder for everyone to get ready for the holiday season. In the meantime, that's it for the show tonight.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in.
And have a good night and happy weekend!
Stay tuned because coming up next is Play-by-Play with Andre Felix and Cheska Litton Calao. 33 days na lang yung regalo namin.
Kaya nga, before we start
we were gonna say, dapat kasama kami.
Exactly. Kasi sabi mo,
every night.
Sabi mo, kailangan na
together.
Christmas party, kailangan yung ganito, ganyan. Nakalimutan mo yung regalo na namin.
Hindi, magkatrabaho na lang tayo para hindi na tayo kailangan umaten.
We should be part of your list na.
We're gonna forge an agreement right now na huwag na tayong magregalo. Diba?
Ay, hindi.
Pero mag-Christmas party tayo.
Hindi pwede kasi ano yan.
Oo nga, tatanungin ko, Boss Pawi, may regalo ka naman sa akin, diba? Tumawa lang.
Tumawa na lang. Kasi ako eh.
Kasi guys, anong meron nyo? Ganun na lang.
Happy weekend,
Happy weekend.
Thank you, Gretchen, and of course, Pauline. Well, we've got a quadruple header in the NBA, plus UAAP cheer dance teams giving us hints on what they'll be performing at this year's competition.
And of course, we will talk about Gilas Pilipinas.
Yes.
Their historic win against New Zealand and their upcoming game against Hong Kong as FIBA writer and media officer Enzo Flojo joins us again live.
Our lucky charm.
Yes.
He is back on the